Cardano ADA is one of the coins I am most bullish on this crypto bull market. And even though it usually isn't one of the first coins to go crazy, rather it usually is one of the last, for a top coin, I think the gains are still pretty damn crazy. Just take a look at this. Cardano sitting right now at about $1.10, has on its highest point ever back in 2021 hit a value of roughly $3. Here it says about $3.10, which is obviously 2.5, let's just say almost a 3x from where we are at today, with the current price basically being the same as what we saw all the way back in the 2017-2018 top, as there it hit about $1.10, right? Pretty akin to the prices we are seeing right now. As it currently stands, Cardano is getting rejected at the previous top on the short term, if you're wondering, which for the most part, I'd say is because Bitcoin's pattern played out just as it did prior, like back in 2021, increasing tops, but a decreasing RSI, with as a result a fall, and currently Bitcoin is indeed below 100,000, but that is focusing too much, I'd say, on the short term, right? All this price action here, all this talk of $1, etc., it's all short-term talk because ultimately we still believe the path to an altcoin season will be followed, that right now Bitcoin is king. We follow whatever Bitcoin does. Then after that is Ethereum, which is the phase that we're currently in, it seems. And then after that is a lot of these large caps, a lot of the main alts, before going into, crazier small micro cap altcoins. And I'd say Cardano usually shines in about phase 3. Before I move on, I'll quickly say, make sure you go ahead and press that like button if you're holding Cardano ADA. And also, if you want to trade crypto, I've left a couple of links down below to, for example, WeX, where right now, the more you trade, the more you get in terms of spins, which can be very profitable. So just check it out. Link is down below. And you can probably use it from anywhere in the world. But if it doesn't work, check out Blowfin. I've left a link to that one down below. You can also use a VPN, by the way. Getting back into it, though, I've often said that many of the coins that we're seeing in the top right now will still do about a triple or so, tripling of its all-time high. So, for example, for Cardano, if it was able to go to $3 before, I think a baseline for this run should be about 10. And here's exactly why. On the one hand, is because I think this will be the craziest run for Bitcoin yet. Going from, I think, $70,000 or so last cycle to, I personally think, more than 200,000. So that on its own will be about a 3x. And altcoins usually perform even better than Bitcoin does. But take a look at this. So here's a little overview of the Cardano price as an example denominated in Bitcoin. So this is, again, how much Bitcoin a one Cardano would cost, and it's 0.000 whatever 1116. Now, the reason this chart becomes so important is when you start looking at how low along the rankings we still are, how low in comparison to these previous bull runs we still are. And when taking a look at the altcoin index, one thing that became quite apparent recently here is that this was a time for altcoins to shine, sure, but it was actually quite a short one. And it seems now more and more likely to me that this is a time where Bitcoin, or perhaps on the short term, maybe even ETH, takes over for a bit, takes some of the dominance back, to then pretty quickly afterwards let our main coins shine. And again, to bring back my price analysis, how did I get to the price I earlier talked about? Well, taking a look at Cardano versus Bitcoin that we were just now referring to, I think it's pretty evident that from the bottom to the top here, it's about a 15x. Well, interesting. What do we do with that? In my opinion, it's quite easy to understand, but I understand if some are confused. Let me explain. So what this denominates, right? What this shows is Cardano relative to Bitcoin. If we right now believe Bitcoin is going to go pretty crazy, where does that leave Cardano's price? Well, if we're talking about dollar terms, we've stated before that as long as Bitcoin goes up, the dollar value of most of our coins will also go up, but it's about which coin does the biggest gains. Bitcoin's had its time, especially when it went from 70,000 to 100,000 almost. It had its time. Then it kind of felt like it was ETH season, but I personally believe Bitcoin is not fully over just quite yet. And in that time, even though all the altcoins do well, it's in that phase that this number usually starts going back down again, as Bitcoin outperforms a lot of the alts, which is denominated by a lower valuation here. Bitcoin does better than a lot of the alts, like I said, as they go for a bit of a correction up until the shift. And what will that shift look like, you might wonder? Well, if we again take a look at this chart, it's basically where the trend shifts over from being mostly downwards like we have seen right now, until we take out this top basically, and it starts going like this, upwards, right? That is the shift that we've been referring to for a while. I mean, if you look at the price right now, it's mostly just downwards, right? You can see that even though recently we have outperformed, this is a good portion of outperformance, depending on where we end up with the top, if we do not take out the previous high levels, I can't say that the tides have really shifted. It's just a dent, but it's not the dent that we'd like to see. And for that, as of this point, we still have a little bit of room to go. We still have to go up about 40% or so in Cardano's price, but here comes the kicker. It is Cardano relative to Bitcoin. So even if if Cardano goes up 40% right now, if Bitcoin also goes up a good portion, then we don't really change anything in this ratio. So this is relatively Cardano needing a way better spot. Then again, when we start thinking of bull market prices for coins like ADA, I like to revert back to perhaps middle of Bitcoin's, or I should say, middle of the Cardano ADA versus Bitcoin dominance. So let's just call it the middle here of Cardano denominated in Bitcoin as a baseline. And that from the bottom is about a 7x or so. And from current prices at 11.20, let's just quickly see, that will be roughly still about a 2.5x or so, taking Cardano from, let's just call it $1.10 to let's just say about $4, $3.50. We can see on the right here that it will be almost like that because Bitcoin almost at $100,000. So calculating this becomes pretty easy, as Cardano is also very close to $1. But let's just say $3, $4 or so. I consider that to be my ADA baseline for where I think the price should eventually end up. In a more in a more optimal scenario, we actually go significantly higher, about 500% up or so from here to maybe even roughly $6 or so. And obviously there are some slightly higher outliers as well. But that is basically my ADA price floor. That's the minimum value I think it should hit over the run. Where are the multipliers coming from? Why do I put that as a minimum? Well, minimum because this is where it should be relative to where it was in previous runs. But there's a caveat, which is if Bitcoin does a 2x, 3x, 4x, 7x, that's all going to be multiplying the prices as well. So taking that into consideration, if Bitcoin does itself a 3x from here, it's about 450% gains, with potentially times 3 on that as well. So let's just say we take 500% gains, so that's about a 6x times a 3x in Bitcoin. Could put us at a nice 18x for Cardano, just to go back to previous relative prices, basically. And I keep trying to portray these goals denominated in Bitcoin more so than the ones denominated in dollar terms, because it's just way more realistic to think, hey, where has it been relative to Bitcoin? And then focus on the Bitcoin price rather than just speculating about a Cardano price out of thin air, because this makes so much sense to me, right? Oh, it's done those prices relatively in terms of market cap before. It could do better this time around, but again, it will always be relative to Bitcoin or whatever is the number one currency at the time. And then from there, we derive everything. I think this makes way more sense than putting up a dollar amount, but some people would like to disagree. Now, still for my own calculations, I like to talk about dollar amounts, but whenever I say $15, $20 in ADA, there's always a lot of opposition of people saying, oh, but it doesn't really sound logical. But then look at what I've just shown you. Does that not sound logical? Back in 2021, it was able to go to, let's just call it 6,300 Satoshi. Back in 2018, it was able to go to 9,000 Satoshi. Right now, it's at 1,100 Satoshi. I think it should be able to do a couple X's just to get back to previous levels. Just from here to previous levels, right? It's about 500% gain, so let's just say a 6X, just to get to previous bull run levels. From that perspective, we really haven't done anything yet. You might say, oh, but the all-time high was $3 per ADA. Well, this just showcases, well, to go to an all-time high from Bitcoin's perspective, we've got a 6X to go, or at least to get back to square one, back to even. And that's because in the meantime, Bitcoin has also done ridiculous in price. And people seem to forget that I don't think it's only about the altcoins' performance, it's also about the altcoins' performance relative to Bitcoin. What is the relative purchasing power in comparison to what Bitcoin would have been, and how good would your altcoin have been, holding up against BTC? Anyway, right now as it stands, the market is in a really interesting spot. A lot of coins all of a sudden are turning back red, but ultimately for a longer term run, it don't really matter too much. But at the end, I'll quickly say, if you also want to trade crypto, because right now we're also trading ADA, we also have a position open here over on Bybit at 25x even. We put about $70 in, and it's at about, I'm going to say $1,100 worth of profit, or about 1,500%. And that's because as of this point, we still believe in ADA, but it was just an example that I opened this trade in, so it didn't really have any size. We're trading ADA on multiple accounts though, so it's all good. And it's mostly because I think ADA is going to do really, really well from here, regardless of what the negative Nancy's may say, regardless of them all. I think we're in a very good spot. But hey, That's just me. If you also want to trade, I'll leave a couple of links down below to 𝗬𝗂X or 𝗫𝗀FUND so that you can also trade. Just check it out. Links are down below. Some cool bonuses can be gotten for new people signing up. And the more you trade, the more bonuses you get. Just check it all out. Links are down below. And that's about it for this video. Make sure you press the like button if you enjoyed it and put the notification bell on so you're always notified whenever something crazy happens.